One night in June 1962, 3 men vanished from the most secure prison in America. No one knows how they escaped. Only the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs remained, and the faint glow of a lighthouse flickering through the cold fog. In the middle of San Francisco Bay, the island stood alone, a block of grey stone rising from the water. They called it Alcatraz, once a military fortress, later a federal prison. From 1934 to 1963, it was built for one purpose: to keep freedom out of reach. But on that night, within those walls built to hold men forever, 3 of them disappeared into the darkness. If freedom has a price, then what did they pay for it that night? Tonight, we return to Alcatraz to listen as the stone walls tell their story. The story of an escape that has never been solved. In the middle of the 19th century, when sailing ships still drifted slowly across the San Francisco Bay, a bare rock rose from the grey water. The Spanish called it Isla de los Alcatrazes, the island of the pelicans. Small, cold, desolate, yet its position sat at the very heart of the West Coast's most vital maritime gateway. In 1850, the United States Army built a stone fortress there. Thick walls, cannons aimed toward the sea. The barracks of Building 64 are resting quietly in the fog. From that moment, Alcatraz became the lonely sentinel of the bay, proud and silent. Through the mist, the sound of waves striking the shore echoed like the breath of a living creature standing guard. Perhaps, from the moment it was born, the island carried within itself the destiny of isolation. The waters around Alcatraz are bitterly cold. The currents run swiftly all year, capable of sweeping away anything that falls in. The waves strike the rocks with a deep, steady rhythm, like the heartbeat of the ocean. When night falls, the lights of the city fade across the shore, leaving only fog, wind, and a vast emptiness. For the soldiers once stationed here, Alcatraz was not merely a post of defense. It was the boundary between man and loneliness. At the dawn of the 20th century, war began to fade away. The fortress fell silent. Rusting cannons stared out to sea, their purpose long gone. In 1934, the US Department of Justice took over the island, transforming the old fort into the nation's highest security federal prison. From that moment, Alcatraz underwent a significant change in its role. Once the guardian of a nation's border, it became the keeper of its own people, no longer facing the ocean, but the human spirit itself. The thick walls that once blocked the waves now blocked freedom. They said that on Alcatraz, isolation was no longer a matter of geography. It was a punishment. When the first ship carrying prisoners arrived in August 1934, the grey rock had already turned into a fortress of silence. Behind its heavy iron gates stretched a maze of narrow hallways and low ceilings. Pale fluorescent light glowed against damp concrete. The footsteps of guards echoed, then disappeared, leaving behind a silence thick as fog. The air inside was so heavy that one could hear one's own heartbeat. A prisoner once said, "Here, silence is the only noise." The prison was built like a massive machine with no escape. Concrete walls nearly a meter thick, anchored deep into the bedrock, made the entire structure seem to grow out of the island itself. Along the cell blocks ran a system of ventilation shafts and underground service corridors, cold spaces where only the echo of metal could be heard. Each cell was made for one man. A steel bed, a small sink, a narrow slot in the door for meal trays. Sunlight reached inside only for a few minutes each day, then vanished like a breath. At the end of the row stood D Block, the solitary confinement unit. Here, darkness became punishment. Some cells had no windows, only damp walls and the sound of dripping water. Time seemed frozen. There was no sense of day or night. Someone once said that in D Block, the only light was the one in their memory. An architect wrote, "Alcatraz is a fortress of discipline. Every stone here was laid to imprison the human will." From the mainland, the prison looked like a solid block of concrete floating on the sea. By day, sunlight turned its grey walls silver. By night, security lights cast a cold white glow, making Alcatraz drift between beauty and frost. The waves never stopped, and in moments of still wind, one could hear faint metallic sounds, as if the island itself was whispering. From a fortress of war to a fortress for men, Alcatraz passed through nearly a century without ever truly resting. It was born for isolation. It existed for confinement. And it still stands as a reminder that freedom can sometimes be just one wall and one cold ocean away. Inside the cold concrete walls of Alcatraz, life moved like a machine that never stopped. Everything was measured down to the minute, down to each breath. The prison held no more than 260 men, and for every 3 inmates, there was one guard on duty. Every step, every movement of a spoon, every glance was contained within the boundaries of control. On Alcatraz, discipline was religion, and silence was faith. But in that religion, there was no God, only walls that knew how to listen. No one could speak without permission. When words disappeared, men began to hear themselves. They heard their heartbeat, their thoughts, the faint echoes that came from the cold stone. Some said Alcatraz didn't imprison them with bars, but with silence heavy as chains. Here, the rarest sound was the sound of human breath. Meals were plain, divided equally. Time was measured by the slam of iron doors and the whistle marking labor hours. Days passed in shades of grey, with dim light filtering through the bars. A few prisoners worked in the workshops. Some cleaned the corridors. The rest sat still, watching the light shift across the walls as the hours passed. On rare Sundays, they were allowed into the yard. They lifted their heads and saw the city of San Francisco in the distance, so close they could almost hear the music from parties across the bay. For many, that sound was the cruelest punishment of all. It reminded them that freedom still existed, only a few miles away, beyond the cold water. Even in a place stripped of all voices, there were names the whole country once knew. Al Capone, the Chicago crime boss, arrived here in 1934. From a man who commanded hundreds, he became prisoner number 85, plucking a banjo in the prison's small band. George Machine Gun Kelly, once feared for his submachine gun, now bowed his head before the rule of silence. And Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz, a murderer turned bird expert, spent 15 years in D Block, speaking only to the memory of wings. Even those names that once made America tremble became nothing more than quiet breaths on this island. Here, fame vanished like mist on the stone walls. But no matter how strict Alcatraz was, it could not escape the laws of the sea and time. The concrete began to crack. Salt and wind slipped through the walls, corroding the steel within. Each year, hundreds of tons of materials are shipped for repairs. But the sea never stopped. Operating costs doubled those of other prisons. Supplies became harder to bring. The walls still stood, but the prison's breath was growing weak. In March of 1963, after 29 years of operation, Alcatraz officially closed. The heavy iron gates shut with a dry, cold sound, like a final farewell. They said that, even abandoned, the island was never truly silent. On foggy nights, the waves still struck the rocks, and between them came a faint metallic ring, like the last breath of its years of confinement. And before Alcatraz sank fully into sleep, there was one night that made the entire nation hold its breath, waiting for something about to happen. Frank Morris arrived on the island in 1960. His file was brief, intelligent, quiet, patient. An IQ of 133, rare for a federal inmate at the time. He had escaped from other prisons before, only to be caught, but he never gave up on the idea of freedom. The other two were the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, born along the Apalachicola River in Florida. They grew up in cold, turbulent waters and strong currents. They learned to swim before they could read, and were able to hold their breath underwater without trembling. When the three met in the prison workshop, painting walls, fixing fans, polishing floors, a small idea began to form. It began like a whisper among the faint sounds of metal scraping against metal. At first, no one noticed Frank Morris. He spoke little. He only watched. He counted the guard's footsteps, measured the space between the bed and the wall, listened to every sound in the corridor, as if he were learning the language of the prison itself. Behind the sink in each cell, he found a small ventilation grate, barely larger than a hand, hidden in shadow. Behind it was a wall leading to the utility corridor, a space meant only for maintenance workers. To most prisoners, it was nothing. But to Morris, it was a door no one had dared to open. They began in secret, using the simplest things: a spoon. A few saw blades were smuggled from the workshop. Every night, when the inspection lights dimmed, they scraped at the wall. Little by little, the concrete of Alcatraz was hard but old. Salt and sea wind had weakened it, and under human hands, even the strongest wall began to give way. They worked in darkness, hiding the sound beneath the hum of fans or faint music. When a flashlight swept across the bars, they froze in place, breathing shallow, silent. The bits of concrete they carved away were hidden in their sleeves or scattered along the corridor during morning cleanup. Month after month, the wall behind the sink grew thinner. Each scrape of metal against stone wasn't just breaking concrete, it was breaking boundaries. Soon, the holes were wide enough for a man to crawl through. To hide them, they used cardboard cut to size, painted it the same pale grey as the wall, and secured it in place with dry soap. In the dim light of the cells, it was impossible to notice. When guards passed by, everything looked normal. The wall is flat. The paint is cold. No one imagined that just behind it lay a hollow space. The utility corridor stretched beyond, like the hidden vein of the prison. When the prison slept, Morris slipped through the vent. The air hissed through the pipes, low and hollow. He stood still, listening to the water drip, smelling the damp steel, then turned back. The next night, he brought the brothers with him. 3 men, 3 breaths, 3 heartbeats in rhythm with the darkness. And there, between stone and steel, they found something Alcatraz was never meant to give: space. A space wide enough to dream. They began planning a way to reach the roof, where they could see the faint lights of San Francisco reflecting across the water. But to get there, they had to fool the guards. Each night, the guards walked their rounds, shining flashlights into the cells to make sure everyone was asleep. One wrong move, one empty bed, it would all be over. They needed something to lie in their place. And so, the idea of the dummy heads was born. They were made from simple things: soap, cement dust, paper scraps, and real hair collected from the prison barbershop. John had steady hands. Clarence was careful. And Morris knew how to mix the color of skin with brick dust and glue. Night after night, they shaped silent faces. No expression, no life, but frighteningly real. Each head was heavy like a real one, filled with cloth scraps, coated with paint, and topped with real hair. They placed them on their pillows each night, pulled the blankets up to the shoulders, and arranged everything as if a man were sleeping. When the flashlight passed by, the faces reflected a faint human tone. The guards saw stillness and walked on. Just a few steps away, behind the wall, 3 men worked quietly, the sound of scraping concrete soft as breathing. Those dummy heads would later become the most famous evidence in Alcatraz's history. They fooled not only the guards' eyes, but time itself. Because when the light passed through the bars that night, the guard had no idea he was looking at 3 faces, but not 3 men. And somewhere in the steel grey corridors, the plan was complete. Frank Morris, John and Clarence Anglin, 3 silent men who didn't just want to escape Alcatraz. They wanted to prove that even in a place built to be impossible, a man could still find a crack of light, a crack carved from concrete, hidden behind a sink, kept alive by one unshakable belief that no wall lasts forever. The night of June 11th, 1962, Alcatraz lay silent, a sleeping stone in the middle of San Francisco Bay. Above, the air was thick with mist. The prison's security lights glowed like faint halos, flickering as if they were breathing. Inside the cell block, 3 men lay still in their beds, their heads turned toward the wall, blankets pulled up to their shoulders. The light from the corridor drifted slowly across the bars, glinting on faces that did not move, faces that no longer breathed. Behind those walls, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, had already begun to move. They pulled away the cardboard covering the vent and slipped into the narrow space beyond. The scrape of metal on stone, the faint rustle of fabric, then silence. The maintenance corridor was narrow and damp, filled with the smell of rust and sea wind. Water dripped steadily from the pipes above, counting the seconds. They crawled slowly, elbows pushing against the darkness, guided only by the faint light of a small homemade flashlight. No one spoke. There was only breathing, and the soft beat of hearts blending with the hum of the wind. For a moment, the whole prison seemed asleep, except for 3 men who were awake, dreaming of a sky without bars. At the end of the corridor stood a vertical pipe leading up to the roof. Morris went first, pressing his hands against the cold metal as he climbed slowly. The Anglin brothers followed, using a rope made from cloth and electrical cords to steady themselves. When they reached the top, they paused. Above them was open air, only wind and sea. Morris pushed aside the last metal grate, careful not to make a sound. Then one by one, they climbed out. On the roof, the fog was heavy and wet, clinging to their clothes and skin. The wind was sharp. Below, the prison yard glowed faintly in pale white light. They crawled low, keeping to the shadows, and moved toward the far side of the security wall, where no camera could see. There they gripped a drain pipe and slid down. The soft thud of landing broke the air for a second, and they froze. But no one noticed. The island stayed deep in its sleep. They crossed the utility yard to the old workshop, where something waited. The one thing that could take them off Alcatraz. A raft made of raincoats. For months, they had gathered more than 50 of them, stitching them together with handmade needles and rubber cement stolen from the shop. Each seam is sealed with heat from the air vents. They built life vests, paddles, and a small wooden pump to inflate the raft manually. It could hold 3 men and ride the waves of the bay. And now, under the dim moonlight behind the clouds, it lay ready in the corner. The wind carried the taste of salt, cold enough to burn the skin. They worked quickly, inflating the raft, listening to the faint stretch of rubber under pressure. When it was full, Morris checked it one last time. Then they dragged it toward the edge of the island. Before them, the sea spread wide and dark. The water was 10 degrees, the current strong enough to sweep away anyone who slipped. But they had planned for this. According to the tide charts, if they left at 11:30, the current would carry them north toward Fort Point, beneath the Golden Gate Bridge. They lowered the raft, tied the vest to their bodies, then pushed gently. The sound of rubber touching water echoed like the breath of the ocean. One by one they slid down. No one spoke. They only looked at each other, their eyes taking the place of words. Frank Morris laid his hand on the raft's edge and looked up at the sky. Above him, the moon was thin, a silver scratch across the dark. Then they disappeared into the water. Perhaps, in the sound of those waves, Alcatraz heard its own breath and knew it would never sleep again. On the island, everything stayed quiet until morning. At 5:30, guard Joe Bowers began the first head count. He shone his light through the bars and saw the 3 men lying in bed, their heads turned toward the wall as always. Everything looked normal, but as he stepped closer, something felt wrong. The hair on one head didn't move with the breeze. It stood perfectly still. He lowered the flashlight. What he saw made the blood freeze in his veins. The face beneath the light wasn't breathing. It was made of soap, painted the color of skin, with real hair glued on top. Under the blanket lay an empty pillow and a hollow space. The alarm erupted across the island. Sirens wailed long and low, rolling over the bay, echoing all the way to San Francisco. Hundreds of guards, police, and patrol boats flooded the waters. They searched every inch east to west, but found nothing. Only a broken paddle and a few scraps of rubber washed up on Angel Island. The search lasted 14 days. Helicopters circled. Navy boats patrolled. Divers searched the depths. The final report said, no possibility of survival, but no bodies were ever found. No remains. No trace. That morning, as the fog lifted, the first light of day touched the bay and the empty walls of Alcatraz. Inside the cell where Frank Morris once slept, the vent was still open, dark as a well. The dummy heads remained on the pillows, staring blankly at the ceiling. They say that if you stand in that cell today, you can still hear the faint sound of waves through the concrete, the echo of an escape that never truly ended. 3 men, one cold, rainy night, and a space that no one has filled for more than 60 years. The morning after the sirens faded, Alcatraz sank back into the stillness of stone. But that silence was different now, heavier, denser, as if it were hiding something that no one could ever reach. The FBI opened a special file called Escape from Alcatraz. The investigation lasted 17 years. Agents retraced every statement, every small detail. They mapped the tides, the winds, and the currents of San Francisco Bay on the night of June 11th, 1962. Every theory was raised. Did they drown in the freezing waters? Or did they reach the shore and disappear into a world that never knew their names? There was no final answer. Investigators recreated the escape multiple times. By 1979, the final report was signed. No evidence of survival. Probable drowning during the crossing, but beneath that, a minor note appeared. Case closed. If alive, will remain under observation. The US Marshals never closed the case. They kept it open, like a door left slightly ajar. And sometimes, it's those doors that are never fully locked that keep people awake the longest. Over the years, small traces appeared. A piece of rubber washed up near Angel Island. A broken paddle made from scrap wood. a small bag of belongings, some clothes, an old photo, a few papers, all carried by the tide to the shore near Fort Point. But none of it proved anything. No bodies, no footprints, no witnesses. Experts said that if they had left the island exactly as the tide turned, they could have drifted toward the horseshoe area, calm water close to land. But when search teams arrived, there was only fog, grey water, and silence. It was as if the sea had swallowed everything, even the answer. Years later, Alcatraz became a museum, but deep in the FBI archives, the file of those 3 men was still updated. The first page still reads, "Wanted, escapees from federal penitentiary Alcatraz Island," and beneath the photographs, a single line remains, "Death not confirmed." Sometimes a letter appears, a photograph, a rumor. Someone claims to have seen them in Mexico, or in Brazil, or in Florida. Someone once said they met an older man with a southern accent who looked just like John Anglin, sitting quietly in a cafe in Texas. But every lead fades like mist. The FBI followed each one, handwriting, photos, fingerprints, and every path led to nothing. Then, in 2013, a letter arrived at the San Francisco Police Department and the FBI office. It was handwritten, shaky but clear. The signature read, "John Anglin." The writer claimed to be one of the 3 who escaped that night in 1962. He said they all survived. Frank Morris had died in 2008. Clarence, 2 years later. And he, John, was 83, dying of cancer. He wrote, "I'm telling the truth. If you announce on TV that I'll receive medical care and won't be imprisoned, I will turn myself in." The letter was only 1 page, but it left the investigators silent for a long time. The FBI analyzed the handwriting, every curve, every mark. They tested the DNA from the envelope and compared it with samples from the Anglin family. Fingerprints, biological traces. Everything was examined. The final result, inconclusive. Among all the cold data, perhaps the only thing that survived was the question itself. The story returned to the headlines. People argued once more. Some believed they drowned that night. Others believed they survived, changed their names, and built quiet lives somewhere far away. In 2014, researchers at Delft University in the Netherlands recreated the escape using tidal simulations. Their results showed that if the men had launched their raft at exactly 11:30, just as Morris had planned, the current would have carried them straight to Fort Point, beneath the Golden Gate Bridge. Everything matched, except for the sea, which stayed silent. And that silence has lasted more than half a century. Today, the FBI file remains in the archives marked closed. The US Marshal's file still reads active under surveillance. Those 3 names remain on the official wanted list of the United States. No one has ever concluded, because sometimes the only thing that lives between truth and legend is a question that was never answered. If you stand at the ferry dock when the fog rolls in, you might still hear the wind whispering through the rusted bars. That sound drifts across the bay like the long sigh of Alcatraz, an island once built to control everything, but that could not hold 3 men, 1 escape, 1 file left open, and a mystery that has drifted quietly across the bay for more than 60 years. In 2014, more than half a century after the night of the escape, scientists at Delft University in the Netherlands decided to face the question that had haunted America for decades. Could the 3 men have survived? They recreated the winds, currents, and tides of San Francisco Bay using modern hydrodynamic modeling techniques. The results surprised everyone. If they had left the island at 11:30 that night, exactly when Frank Morris had planned, the water would have carried them north, not out to the ocean, but toward the shore, toward Fort Point, where the lights of the Golden Gate Bridge shimmer across the bay. But if they had left just 30 minutes later, the tide would have changed, and the current would have pulled them straight into the Pacific. The model proved that, scientifically, survival was possible. Those cold numbers felt like a faint heartbeat of hope through the silence of time. Science could measure the sea, but no one could measure human endurance. Even without proof, the findings stirred something deep inside people. Because if they truly escaped, then somewhere in the story of a prison once called impossible to break, there was still a crack, a sliver of human will hidden between steel and stone. Just a few minutes, a few strokes of a paddle. That was the difference between life and death. But that night, it seemed that both wind and water chose to guide them. From that moment on, Alcatraz was no longer just a symbol of captivity. It became a symbol of courage, of the human desire to cross the line no one else dared to cross. But before that June night became legend, Alcatraz already carried another story, one that time had almost forgotten. It was 1946, 16 years before the escape of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers. A group of prisoners tried to seize the armory and take the guards hostage. The plan failed, but they captured Cell Block C and fought back. For 3 days, the island was drowned in smoke and gunfire. Shots echoed across the bay, reaching all the way to San Francisco. Marines surrounded Alcatraz from every side. When the smoke cleared, 6 men were dead, 2 guards and 4 prisoners. Blood stained the stone floors, and the smell of gunpowder lingered in the air. From that day on, the island seemed to understand that peace was only an illusion. After the riot, security tightened. Alcatraz became nearly untouchable, but the Battle of Alcatraz left a scar, quiet, deep, and permanent. Few spoke of it again. The bullet holes were patched, the walls were repainted, but the memory remained buried in the stone. And maybe that shadow was what kept the island from ever truly sleeping. Because long before the Great Escape, Alcatraz had already heard the sound of men struggling for freedom, knowing their fight might end only in blood and silence. More than half a century has passed, and the island has undergone significant changes. Every year, more than 1 million visitors step ashore. They walk through the cold corridors, following the worn paths left by countless footsteps before them. They stand in the cell where Frank Morris once lay, staring at the small vent behind the sink, listening as the guide retells the story of that June night. Inside the Museum of the National Park Service, behind glass, the papier-mâché dummy head still rests. The paint has faded. Real hair still clings to its forehead. Next to it lies a fragment of the rubber raft, stitched from more than 50 raincoats, now darkened by time. They don't speak, but they tell everything through silence. Alcatraz is no longer a prison fortress. It has become a monument of memory. People come not just to look at the past, but to ask questions about what it means to be human. In the wind that moves through the empty halls, you can almost hear the faint breath of escape, the breath of those who risked everything for freedom. Many visitors stop before a small plaque that carries the words of a former guard. We thought we were the ones keeping them inside, but the truth is, Alcatraz kept us all. Everyone who comes here brings their own questions and leaves with the same silence. Amid the light that glints on the iron bars, the story of that night in 1962 still lingers, still retold, still whispered in the sound of waves striking the shore. Alcatraz has become a place where the past never truly closes. Half prison, half mirror, reflecting both confinement and the dream of escape. A dream belonging to those who left and to those who stayed behind. No one knows if they drowned beneath the bay or lived quietly somewhere far away. But every time morning fog drifts across the water, something reminds us. Some journeys never need an answer, only the courage to begin. Years after the escape had already become a legend, the sealed investigation files, deep within the FBI archives, were finally made public. The yellowed pages, now displayed on the FBI vault, revealed the astonishing precision behind the plan that Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers had carried out. Inside were hand-drawn sketches, guard schedules, ventilation maps, and lists of ordinary items that had been turned into tools of escape. Metal spoons, sandpaper, bits of wood, electrical wires, and glue. One of the most detailed reports, spanning 40 pages, described every single step the three men took. They carved through concrete. They crafted fake heads. They hid bits of debris in their pockets. They collected real hair from the barber shop. They sealed their raft with melted rubber. Every sound, every movement, every flicker of light had been planned to the second. Reading those notes felt like listening to a piece of music written with sheer willpower. In one quiet line, an agent wrote, "There is no evidence they made a single mistake in their preparation." That sentence, shaky but clear, carried something more than just observation. It carried an unspoken admission that even in a system built to be perfect, intelligence and determination could still find their way through. From that moment, the Alcatraz escape ceased to be just the story of three inmates. It became a testament to the human capacity to reach beyond its own limits. When the files were released, historians began to see the event in a new light. Many called it the greatest unsolved escape in US history, not only because of its daring plan, but because of the silence that followed it. No one knew where they went, but everyone understood what it took to try. And maybe that silence was the ending they chose for themselves. The story soon grew beyond the walls of Alcatraz. Newspapers, television, magazines, all spoke of it as a symbol of willpower, tragic but deeply human. In 1979, the film Escape from Alcatraz brought the story to life. Clint Eastwood played Frank Morris with quiet intensity and cold precision. When the credits rolled, audiences sat in silence. They didn't know if the men had lived or died, but they knew they had crossed something greater than bars and concrete. They had crossed the boundary between confinement and freedom. 3 empty beds, 3 dummy heads. A raft made of raincoats is drifting into the dark. Those images became a lasting symbol, not only of Alcatraz, but of the American spirit itself. The spirit that never stops reaching beyond its limits. In museums and classrooms, in documentaries and lectures, the story continues to be told as a quiet metaphor for endurance, for the refusal to surrender. Many believe that this escape changed Alcatraz forever. From a place of imprisonment, it became a place of myth. And then the story slows. Maybe they died. Maybe they lived. But one thing is sure. From that night on, Alcatraz never truly slept again. When the city across the bay sinks into sleep, the lighthouse beam still moves slowly across the water, brushing against the salt-stained grey walls. Visitors still stop before the small vent behind the sink, wondering if someone really passed through it, or if it was just a dream built from belief. No one knows the answer. Only the sound of waves, slow and steady, like the heartbeat of the island itself. Because Alcatraz, even now, lives in 2 worlds. One of the present, where people take photos and smile, and one deeper, where the same question still echoes in the dark. Did they make it to the other side? Perhaps it is that uncertainty that keeps the story alive. It needs no ending, because sometimes the mysteries are left unfinished. These are the ones that memory never lets go of. And in the whisper of the wind, you can almost hear the sea speaking softly, reminding us of something long ago. That on this small island in San Francisco Bay, 3 men once gave everything they had to find a way toward the light. And from that night on, the island that no one could ever escape never truly slept again. From a lonely fortress in the mid-19th century to the most secure federal prison of the 20th, Alcatraz has lived through almost a century of change. It was first built to guard the entrance to San Francisco, then became the place where the most feared men in America were held. From its first stone walls to its final steel bars, the island witnessed countless faces, countless fates, and dreams that were never spoken aloud. And when its purpose came to an end, Alcatraz remained, no longer a prison, but a fragment of memory, a silent witness to the things humanity builds and the things it tries to escape. Today, people no longer refer to Alcatraz as a prison. They call it a symbol, because nowhere else contains both extremes so completely: power and longing. And perhaps it is here, in the place where men were most confined, that freedom found a new meaning. Within walls stained by sea salt, there is something more profound than confinement. It is the dream of breaking past all limits. The men once held here used patience and intelligence to prove that no barrier is truly absolute. And that is what makes Alcatraz a symbol of humanity, not of defeat, but of faith. Faith that even in darkness, one can still find the way toward the light. Now, when night falls, fog drapes over the old stone roofs. The surface of the sea glows faintly, silver in the dim light. Water whispers against the cliffs like the slow heartbeat of something still alive. Above, the lighthouse turns gently, each rotation a quiet breath of memory moving through the empty halls. The wind carries the scent of salt, of time, and of stories that were never finished. In that stillness, Alcatraz seems to drift into sleep, but its sleep is never truly peaceful. Thank you for walking with me through the cold corridors of Alcatraz. Thank you for staying until the end, to listen to what the old walls still remember, until another night comes, when the stories rise again from the fog, when the sound of the waves returns, like the whisper of history, a whisper that has never truly gone silent.